Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the Vet S.O.S podcast. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that Vet S.O.S lifeline. We're here to help. Oh, just when y'all thought that we was over, just when y'all thought that we was done, I have a special guest for everybody today. This young man sitting to my left, your right, is a great author. His book has opened a door that I had closed for a while. And I'm sure after this conversation, you probably be saying the same thing. But what happens when life you carefully built changes in an instant? When the plans you've made and the future you imagine and the confidence you've carried are all shaken up by one unexpected moment. I understand that because I was there. Some storms happen in the sky. Others happen deep within the soul. Today's guest knows both. I call him my brother from another. This one, when people come on this show, we build such a good relationship. People like, man, how long y'all knew each other? 10, 15, 20 years? Just recently. But when you know that you have good communication and good energy flowing back and forth, and that's what he's going to talk about his book today. He's the author of On Broken Wings, the flight that tested my faith and the journey that restored it. This isn't simply about aviation. This is a story about surviving what should have broken you. It's about discovering that faith isn't proven when life is easy. It's revealed when life becomes uncertain. Today, we're going to be talking about courage, purpose, family, leadership, and restoration, and why our greatest setbacks are often become the foundation of our greatest callings. So pull up a chair, come and sit on the stoop, because we're about to get the scoop. What's going on, brother? How we doing today, Ken? I'm ready. I am ready. How you doing today?
Hey, Kings, man, it feels like I've known you for like 15 years, doesn't it, already?
Everybody's like, I have people that reach out to me like, man, do you dig in your Rolodex and call people from 10, 15 years ago? I was like, no, when I had the conversation with them, I share my story to let them know that their book has already reached one person.
Yeah. Well, we share a lot.
So I just want to say thank you for coming on. I always share with everybody, like, because I go and I do a encyclopedia dive on the author. So I know a little bit. I got the bio. I got all of that stuff. I got the scoop on Ken, but I know the audience that's listening in and the ones that are viewing this and is going to pass it on to others because they're going to like, they're going to subscribe, and they're going to share. They want to know who Ken is. What's the scoop on you, Ken?
Oh, well, I followed in your footsteps going in the Air Force, right? No, I mean, when I joined the Air Force a long time ago. My dad was in the Air Force, 7 years enlisted, 27 as an officer, and I wanted to be like him. So I remember visiting the Air Force Academy as a 10-year-old, and he lifted me up over that wall. And I said, from that moment, I said, I want to be like my dad. He's my hero. Some families don't have that kind of good relationship between a dad and a son, but in my family, I did. And so I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be an Air Force officer, and I wanted to go fly jets someday. So I started a journey that ended up doing that, and a few stumbles along the way.
You just hit something very pivotal. You said you wanted to be like your dad.
Yeah.
You looked over that wall. You seen those aircraft. You smelled that JP-8. And he's like, I want to be a pilot. Yep. I want to fly into the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
And be the one when the troops on the ground have troops in contact, or you taking supplies over, you want to be the one, the pilot, the co-pilot behind that, leading the charge, or being in that mission, in that formation, to do your part.
Right. Well, when I was young, I I remember that we didn't have Netflix and all those kinds of things. So I would sit up at night and read adventure stories, Call of the Wild, 20,000 Leagues Under the
Mm.
Sea, World War II pilots, Revolutionary War heroes. And I just wanted to be one of those guys. And so then I saw that in my dad. And when I looked over that wall at the Air Force Academy as a little 10-year-old,
Mm.
I looked at those cadets marching. I said, wow, this is a world I never even knew about. And I want to be a part of it. So that kind of started the journey. And then a few years later, I remember being at my grandfather's house in Pennsylvania, and my dad and my grandfather, curmudgeon-y old guy, said, "Hey, Kenny, what do you want to do in life?" He was a doctor. Almost all my relatives were doctors, and I told him I want to be a pilot. And he laughed a little bit, and then as we walked away, I said, "I also want to go to Wall Street and be a stockbroker." And he really laughed
Mm.
at that because he had survived the Great Depression. And by whatever means happened, I end up being both of those things. So yeah, I started off as a 10-year-old kid, just reading adventure stories, looking up to my dad and wanting to be like the kind of band of brothers I saw that were surrounding him, lieutenants, captains, NCOs that were, given
Mm.
their service to the country. And that's what I wanted to do.
And that all became before the flight, right? You talk about
Oh yeah.
identity.
The flight. You call it the flight, don't you, Kings?
Yes, the
Okay,
flight.
I'll get there. I'll
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there.
the identity, the calling, the
Yeah.
dreams. These are all things that's leading up to
Yeah.
the flight. We're gonna get there later on
Okay,
in
good.
the conversation,
Yeah.
but it's the build up to it.
Yes. Yes. It's the
So
build up to it.
let's touch on the identity of Ken. Like you talked about going to the academy.
Well, before I went to the academy, I applied. I didn't get accepted, and I was going to go to Auburn to ROTC, and I had a roommate. I was going to be enrolled in
Mm.
engineering, girls, college, the fun life. And I got a little brochure in the mail that said, "Hey, you just missed making the Air Force Academy. We'll give you a scholarship to go to a little prep school out in Oregon." And I told my parents, that's crazy. That's like a tiny little school, math and English every day,
Hmm.
PT every day. Why would I do that? I could go off to college and be an officer just going to ROTC. But, I always had that 10-year-old's dream of going to the Air Force Academy, being a cadet and being a pilot. And I knew that that was my best chance. So I turned down everything at Auburn and got on an airplane and flew out, joined 79 other young men that were all probably inspired by the Apollo 11 late moon landing, fighter pilots in the skies. We all wanted to do that kind of thing. And so I joined this group of 79 guys, 6 months, math, English, little schoolhouse. Uh, it was like it's like one of those movies where you see a military prep school in the East Coast and all these guys
Yes.
are harassing each other and trying to date the local girl and competitive. That's what it was like. And I got done. My SATs skyrocketed from all the training. And the next year, I was accepted to the Air Force Academy. And June 1st, in 1973, I joined the Air Force Academy. So that was a journey there for 4 years, an amazing experience. It's friends to this day, just the camaraderie, the toughness, the academics. I didn't do great there. I did great in prep school, but I didn't do great at the Air Force Academy. I didn't apply myself as hard as I could. I wish I had, but I didn't. It's pretty much, I just wanted to graduate and go be a pilot. So my goal at the Air Force Academy wasn't to get the top grades. It was to become a pilot. So I graduated and I became a pilot. I went off to pilot training. Um, and like you talked about, Kings, my identity was being built from a young age. I wanted to
Mm.
be like those heroes in my books that I read about. I wanted to be like my father. I wanted to, be good enough to be an Air Force Academy cadet. I wanted to be good enough to graduate from the Air Force Academy. 40% of the guys who went to the academy with me didn't even graduate. We only graduated 60% that year. Started like
Wow.
1,500 and graduated about 860. So
Wow.
a lot of guys left. So it was a tough time, but I always wondered if I'd make it through, but I never wondered if I would quit. I just knew that
Right.
I had a goal in mind and I was going to do it. And next thing I know, I was at pilot training. So that's another journey. In that pilot training, I went to Columbus Air Force Base, Mississippi, met a girl, fell in love, flew jets, camaraderie, amazing camaraderie, tough training, flying all over the skies in little jets. And I graduated. I graduated in the top half of my class. I had applied myself more in pilot training than I did the academy. And then I took the next assignment as an instructor pilot.
Right. So before we get to the instructor pilot, so what was your idea? Like, what was your aircraft that you want? Because I know the way how the Air Force does it, they kind of rack and stack, right? You have the fighters, you have the transport, you have the different airframes, you have rotary wing.
Well, the very top guys back then usually want to get fighters. Now, we had 20 guys in our class and we all graduated, which was unusual too. And I think there were only 3 fighters for 20 guys. I was in the top
Mm.
half, but I wasn't in the top 3. So, a lot of us had a dream of being fighter pilots, but a lot of us were starting to develop a dream to be airline captains, live the life of an airline pilot, which is actually what most of my friends actually ended up going on to do. So, I did well enough to apply for a fighter, but I wasn't going to get a fighter. So I end up applying, and I wanted to fly cargo jet, big jets to go be an airline pilot. But if you pick the wrong thing, the Air Force did a catch-22, and they gave you actually what you absolutely did not want. So,
Right.
if I applied to be, like you said, you were applying to be a loadmaster at one time.
Right.
So
Right.
I thought I was having these dreams of flying C-141s out of Charleston, like my good buddy did. He ended up going to
Gold
be a
Star
2-star. He ended up
lifters.
going to be a 2-star general. But um, I knew if I applied for a 141, I didn't get it, I'd probably be flying B-52s at low level with a helmet on. And I said, important mission, but not for me. So I end up finding out that there were some instructor pilot slots, and I also had a girlfriend, so I had incentive to stay. So I took an instructor pilot slot.
So here you are. You get the instructor pilot. He's like, man, I'm a freshly
Oh yeah,
certified pilot,
oh oh yeah,
LT.
oh yeah. I write in my book how most 24-year-olds are looking for the corner office space. I my
Yes.
my my office was a supersonic jet. I mean, 1.2, 1.3 Mach, T-38, kind of the same variant. If you watch Top Gun and the bad guys are flying, chasing us, it's kind of that variant of that aircraft. That's an F-5, but it's a T-38 Talon called the White Rocket. And
Mm.
I had applied to fly the slower jet, the T-37 Tweet, and I ended up getting assigned to the faster jet, the T-38. So then I had to go off to training for that. Yeah.
So here we are. The
Yep.
moment that everything changed. You got the instructor pilot slot. Now you're training other pilots, foreign pilots, pilots from other countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where we're gonna come in and touch on the crisis, the fear, and the unexpected adversity. Like, I want individuals to know flying an aircraft, you have to have certain checks and balances, right? You have to go through a checklist. You need to do a function check. Everything, once you get up in the air, is still little stuff that goes on. The machine is working,
Yeah.
but when stuff starts to fail and stuff starts to go offline, and here you are as the instructor pilot, and you have a student
Yeah.
that's up there 16,000 feet in the air.
Yeah. Well, you talked about identity, though. I mean, to to paint this picture, I mean, from that 10-year-old kid that wanted to be like his dad, and my
Mm.
dad ended up retiring as a colonel. So here's my dad as an Air Force colonel. I wanted to be like my dad. I end up going to the Air Force Academy. I end up being a pilot. I end up flying this supersonic jet. I end up being an instructor pilot. So I had hit what I wanted to hit. I was, I had achieved those things that struggled to. I mean, I went to a prep school to get in there. I went through all 4 years of the Air Force Academy, pilot training. So I had quote made it to be an instructor pilot. And then, yeah, I was assigned initially to train mostly Iranians and some Saudis. And I was 49 flights in, so I was a pretty brand new instructor pilot, second lieutenant, which is pretty amazing. They're called FAPEs, first assignment IPs, and
Yes.
they select us at a young, inexperienced. I mean, pilot training's 210 hours back then. So here I've got about 300 hours. So you're not far removed from not even being able to start the engines of an airplane to
Right.
now you're training foreign students how to fly formation, how to fly instruments, how to do acrobatics, how to land the darn thing, which is no easy task. And yeah, I was assigned to an Iranian student. And then March 19th, 1979, on a Monday, things changed.
Yeah. Now walk us through that when you talk about things change. So you're up there in the air going through certain I know in the book you said he's going through like routine flight tests and then
Sure. Well, let
engine
me.
failure.
Yeah, I mean, I to give you this picture of the quote, the flight, as you'd call it. We did some maneuvers by the base, and then we went out to an acrobatic area in northern Mississippi, and we were doing what they call a split S, which is basically half of a loop. Start off at the top, flip it upside down, yank on the controls, and head the opposite direction, 10,000 feet lower. The student had made a few mistakes. And so I took the aircraft and then I was climbing back up to altitude so we could do some more maneuvers. And uh, I saw a master caution light on the console, a yellow light. It was
Um,
bright. It was bright out, so I thought, well, that could be the glint of the sun off the instruments. So I rolled out, looked over at my engine instruments, and the shock of my life. Both engines, all the engine instruments were winding down. Totally unexpected. No indicators before that. Just boom. I'd say it's like it's like driving a Formula One down the track right next to somebody, and all of a sudden, bang, your engine's gone. But there's no place to pull off. So
right.
there's no pit crew waiting for you. So I both engines failed. I tried to restart the aircraft several times. We were dropping out of the sky. In the end, I probably should have lowered the nose of the aircraft and gotten more airspeed going through it. Um, so I lowered it some, but probably not enough as a second lieutenant. And I didn't really realize that until later. I was trying everything in the book that I could do to get the aircraft restarted. Students semi panicking, not much help, and passing 8,000 to 9,000 feet. I couldn't think of anything else to do. And I'll never forget that moment where I thought, well, I'd like to do something, but I have no idea what to do. I've tried
Mm,
everything. So, and we're sinking at over 6,000 feet a minute. So we're losing 1,000 feet every 10 seconds. The length of a short runway is about 8,000 feet. So we're dropping like a rock. These are tiny little wings, thin, tiny little wings, not much glide on these things available. And we were dropping, and I just, for that split second, to me, I relate it to being like, like you were walking along a bridge over a river and it's a train track and the train's coming. Well,
mm,
you got two choices: get run over by the train or jump the 50 feet into the water, which will probably kill you too. You jump into the water. And, there's a moment where you know what you have to do and you just do it. And it doesn't matter if it's scary, if you have to eject, but I decided that at that moment, there was nothing else I could do in the time that we had left. And so I told the student, if it's a controlled ejection, uncontrolled, if you're taking off and something goes bad, it's eject, 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 and bang, bang, bang. But if it's at all controlled, the back seat's supposed to go first so that the front seat blast doesn't burn the back seater. So I told the student, I said, Lieutenant Zuri, I'm going to eject and I want you to eject right after me. Do you understand? He said, yes, sir. And that moment changed my life. I reached down, pulled up a couple of yellow and black handles, pulled the triggers, and that was an explosion that you you don't want to go through. So I got shot out of the aircraft like just like the movie Top Gun. The canopy flies off.
right.
Hopefully it goes off. Huge amount of force. You basically don't go unconscious for a couple seconds because the G forces are, in normal flying, you might pass out at 8, 9 Gs. This thing, when for instantaneously, it's 18, 20 Gs. I mean,
Wow.
it's a lot of power. And I still deal with back issues from that. So I just remember getting shot out of the aircraft, a tremendous amount of noise. I felt like I was crushed I felt like I was crushed in the seat like a tin can. And next thing I know, I open my eyes and it's black. All I see is black. And what happened is I had gone to Fort Benning airborne training when I was at the Air Force Academy. So I had experience at this with parachutes. But at airborne training, I either exited wrong once or something happened and the straps from my riser and my backpack knocked my helmet down over my head and I had to yank it back up. Well, that's what happened this time. So I yanked it back up, looked up at my parachute. Hopefully it's open and I'm not just falling through the sky. And it's open, but there's debris flying everywhere. I'm worried that it's going to burn the parachute, tear it. Part of the parachute is flapping like somebody's shaking out a dirty rug. So I was afraid that the whole chute would collapse. There is no spare parachute. And I start to float down. And uh, I looked around the sky. I was bleeding. I had cut myself on my chin right here and I had blood all over me. And I reached up and it was mushy. And I didn't know how bad it was, but I knew I needed to get on the ground and stop the bleeding. So I looked around and I saw my student in the distance, slightly lower than me. And then the other part of my journey happened. I noticed a jet coming from his direction, an airplane coming my direction, my way from his direction. And I said, "Well, who could be flying a jet up here in our acrobatic area?" And then I realized it was a T-38. I go, "They can't be looking for me this fast."
Wow.
They weren't looking for me. It was my
Right.
jet. It was my jet that actually had restarted. I didn't know that at the time. And
Wow.
the thing came right at me and then it kind of banked off really 100, 200 yards away off into a cloud. And I only saw the underside of it. I didn't see the top side of the aircraft. So that's why I thought it was another pilot looking for us already, or we had gone into the wrong acrobatic area during our accident. But at any rate, that was scary. And then I was swaying in my parachute in these huge arcs, like a swing set at a playground, and I end up pulling the 4 lines jettison, they call it, on the back of the parachute, so that the some lines get released and some air helps you guide the parachute a little bit better. And at the end of the story in the parachute, which there's a little bit more, but I end up crashing into trees, 80, 90-foot pine trees in
Mm.
Mississippi, and I was hung up about 30, 40 feet. And then I I, uh, I thought I had to get down on the ground because of the bleeding. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but it was all over me, so I thought I was really bleeding badly. So I hooked my leg over a branch 30, 40 feet up and unstrapped from the parachute. And now the parachute's not holding me up, just the branch is. And of course, to top off my Monday, the branch broke. And then I end up I end up falling
Wow.
I end up falling 30, 40 feet down to the ground, knocked the air out of me. And that was the flight.
And speaking of that, so for the ones who just pulling up a chair, coming and sitting on the stoop to get the scoop, or the author,
Yeah.
the pilot, the Air Force veteran Ken, and the author of On Broken Wings. That's the book right there.
Yeah.
And before we had press record, I said, Ken, you know what? I said, we all have a plan. You know, as the famous Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And as a certified, right, as a certified trainer, you have a pilot student. You like, okay, you go over these scenarios
Yep.
inside the classroom.
Right.
Hey, if this happened, hey, if engine failure, we do this.
Yeah.
But you did all those things, and you still had to keep poise and under calm exterior, right? Because you have a student, so you want to. I, I know for me, I would have been like panicking on the inside because I'm like, man, I'm falling at a rate so fast. I don't know if I could get the engines back started. So then, like you said, you instantly instinct kicked in. Hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to eject. Hey, I'm gonna go. And you know what I'm saying? Like you going down the checklist in your head, and that's just
Yeah.
like transitioning when you moving from one job to a next, or moving from one life event to a next. You might have that list of plans, but when everything goes wrong, what do you do?
Right.
How do you get there?
Right. Well, my I didn't do everything that I probably should have. I should have gotten more airspeed going through the engines, and the action aboard was another story because the odds of a two-engine T-38 jet losing both engines at the same time is pretty slim. There's no
Mm,
doubt, but it did, and I don't know why it did. The airplane they end up finding the airplane a week later. Took National Guard troops a week to find it. It was buried 30 feet in the ground and hit almost 700 knots. So
wow.
there was basically nothing left. I would have been vaporized. There was nothing left, pretty much. So here I am, second lieutenant. I crash a jet. Probably didn't lower the nose low enough. Did follow all these other procedures to get the aircraft started, but they honestly they came back and said, well, it's got to be pilot error. You know, the pilot might have caused an engine to go wrong, or he could have done this, or he could have done that. Maybe he was a second lieutenant and he panicked. Well, I didn't panic. Maybe should have lowered the nose, and I think for sure, but I didn't panic. I was working through the checklist, like you said, working through the procedures, coming to a conclusion that I didn't want to reach, but it was the right conclusion, and I got us out, and we both lived. So in the long run, it worked out, but it was definitely a tough go there because I remember landing on the ground, taking off my helmet, well, falling on the ground, getting back up in a few minutes, taking off my helmet and thinking, wow, I I did everything I thought that I could to get that aircraft started. I'm pretty proud of myself. But I ran into a buzzsaw in the Air Force.
Right. And that's when you probably felt everything around you felt like it was falling apart.
It did. The identity wa the identity was gone.
Mm,
Uh, the identity was definitely gone. The infallible, intense, positive guy that I was, that I'd always dreamed of being, it was definitely damaged.
mm. Did your faith ever become brutally honest with God? Because I know that's, a man of faith, like, man, if I get through this, like, what did those conversations sound
Well,
like?
to me, I kept wondering, why did this happen to me?
Mm,
Why, why out of all these people, all these pilots that I know, all these aircraft, why did this happen to me? And I did ask, I wasn't a real faithful man. I I call myself a Sunday school Christian.
right.
Sunday school and church with my parents and Bible study and that kind of thing. But I wasn't a deeply religious man. But at that time, I definitely asked myself some questions. Why did this happen? Is there a different purpose in my life? Am I
Mm,
a failure? Um, what kind of man am I? Why did God do this to me? The things that Job asked himself, and I just, I just, there, and then there, I had to go through all these boards that were very tough. And the worst part, though, wasn't the boards because I kind of expected that. The worst
mm.
part was that I felt alone by myself going through all this. I didn't feel like I
Yeah.
had God in my corner. My dad was really busy as an officer. He couldn't make it to my base. Some of my friends visited me, but I know that today. But at that time, I felt like I was alone. I felt like I was abandoned by my commanders, abandoned by the squadron that I flew with, and I felt, wow, I've got the whole weight of the world on me. And I
Mm,
lost my girlfriend. Almost lost my life, and now I've lost my career. And I remember two officers pulling me aside, and we had a heart-to-heart conversation. And they told me that my career was basically over. That this is going to be really hard on you, Ken. And I remember I remember when they walked out of that room. I leaned down on my knees with my hand, not on my knees, but I leaned forward on my knees with tears in my eyes, and I said, my life is over. That's it. I always my identity was to be this 10-year-old, be this guy like my dad, be this hero, be this Air Force Academy graduate, be a pilot, fly these supersonic jets, become an airline captain or a fighter pilot. And now it's all gone. So that's what I had to struggle with.
Wow. And thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that because that shows that it can happen to anybody at any given moment. So, do you believe tragedy reveals who you are, what a person is, or does it create something entirely new? What's the scoop on that?
No, I believe that I believe that it does do that. Tragedy reveals who you really are. Um, you know, when I read those, it sounds goofy, me talking about reading books about adventurers, but the one thing when you read those books as a kid, you realize that a story a story isn't really a story. A movie isn't really a movie unless
Hmm.
someone's going through a struggle. It's the struggle.
Mm,
It's the ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel and to keep moving towards that light that ends up being a story. No no one wants to read a story about the greatest fighter pilot in the world and all the things that he did perfectly well, and that's it. You want to hear the story about how he got shot down one time and how he got back
mm,
up on the airplane, or how his life, they captured him and he escaped that, or you didn't think he'd make it through pilot training. He made it through pilot training and now he's a hotshot fighter pilot. You want to hear stories about it's the struggle that makes the story. And I think it's a struggle that helps define who you are. So for me,
wow.
I took inspiration from my father and from the other guys that I had gone through the Air Force Academy with. I mean, the Air Force Academy was a tough place. It gave
Right.
me, as David Goggins calls it, David Goggins talks about the calluses that we build up from the tough times that we
Yes.
go through. And when we build up calluses, and for me, that was going to a prep school, going to the Air Force Academy, going to airborne training, becoming a pilot, becoming an instructor pilot. Okay, I crashed a jet. But you know what? I've got the calluses. I know I can make it through this. And
Yeah.
so even when I leaned forward with my elbows on my knees with tears in my eyes, I told myself, I'm not the chapter's not fully written on me. I'm going to make some sort of comeback. I don't know what it is. And shortly thereafter, I was because of the perceptions of what had happened in the cockpit, I had to go to a flying evaluation board. And if you ever heard about a
Mm.
flying evaluation board, an FEB,
Oh, yes.
this is basically the end of your life as a pilot or as an
Yeah.
aircrew member. And I remember getting that notice and totally surprised me that I was getting that notice. I got a notice in the mail that said you're going to a flight evaluation board, and I said that's it. I'm losing my wings.
Mm,
And I just I remember one day I went I was I just decided that I was not going to give up. Those adventurers I read in my books, they never gave up. They got stuck in the tundra of the Arctic. They got stuck underneath the oceans. They were in a fighter pilot duel with the German ace, but they never gave up. And I just
mm,
decided, like David Goggins talks about, that I wasn't going to give up. I
mm.
might go down, but I'm not giving up. And so I
Wow.
decided to go to the flight evaluation board. I had two choices: one to give up my wings, and one to fight for them. And I went and I fought for my wings. And I actually had three officers that ran the board that basically had a judgment that was different than the safety board that I
Mm,
had. A more positive, let's put it this way, a much more positive viewpoint of my skills as a pilot and the things that I had done in the aircraft. Not that I did everything right, I'll admit that, and I wish I had, but they came out with positive findings and said, yes, this guy can keep his wings. And I remember it's kind of like one of those
mm,
movies where the courtroom ends and the judge and everybody does something. Well, what happened here is these judges of these three pilots, they came down and they shook my hand and they patted me on the back. And they basically, in their way, welcomed me back into the fraternity of pilots. And
mm.
I said, that's it. I've kept my wings. So, and uh, that's kind of what happened. I ended up keeping my
Yeah.
wings. So I also had to, but I had to deal with many different issues. One was kind of the obvious one, which is fear of flying, um,
Mm,
because I had almost lost my life in an aircraft. And I remember a month after my accident, I had no idea what was going to happen to me. These boards were ongoing. I was pushed to a corner office at a desk that had
huh,
no computer on it. And I was just sitting there myself every day, wallowing in my sorrow and wondering what was going to happen to me.
It's a lonely
And
world, wasn't it?
it was a lonely world. It was very
Yeah.
lonely. And I I had wanted to be an airline pilot, so I had gone to the local airport and earned my commercial license during pilot training. So I went out to the local airport all by myself, rented a Cessna 152 a month after my accident, and I took that thing off the ground, and the confidence started coming back. I remember flying over the Tombigbee River in Mississippi and rocking my wings at a fisherman that was down there, and he waved back to me, and I said, I'm still a pilot. I'm still a pilot. And so and then I ended up at the Air Force. The way the Air Force is, they want to keep their paperwork right. So the I think they needed to keep me current in the airplane until the boards had decided what to do with me. So I end up flying 5 more times in the T-38, and I yanked that thing around the sky and tried to get the cobwebs out of my mind of how close I had come to dying. But the fear of flying, the fear of flying. So I still flew after that. We could talk about that, but the fear of flying never left. I just suppressed it and kept
Mhm.
flying. So I end up leaving the Air
Wow.
Force. I end up crashing the jet with 300 hours. I end up leaving the Air Force with 2,500 hours. So I still
Wow.
flew, but it wasn't the fear of um, of flying that really impacted me long term. It was the fear of failure. I had been perceived to have not done everything right or have quote failed by the Air Force, and I had to carry that with me the rest of my life. The fear of what people thought about me. That hey, that's my identity had switched. We talk about identity, you and I. My
Right.
identity had switched from instructor pilot, 24-year-old, great pilot, to hey, that's the guy who crashed the jet. That was my
Mhm.
identity, and
Wow.
it was very difficult to deal with that
Wow. So
because
Ken, what did that reveal about you? So you having all these second guesses, right? Because
yep,
I shared with you my journey,
yeah,
right? So I know what it feels like to be pushed aside. I know what it's like to go through that board. For as a defender, security forces, we can't have that weapon. We can't arm up. Guess what?
right,
I can't go to work.
right,
So your life, your professional life is in somebody else's hands.
yes,
And one of my mentors once told me, if you did everything right, and you know what I'm saying? Because when the incident happened, everything is happening so fast. Your
yeah,
brain is trying to process everything.
right,
But when somebody's coming to look back at it, they taking their time and they dissecting it, right? Well, why did you do
right.
this?
you
Why you
know,
did do that? Man, why you pulled up? Why you ain't pushed out? All this stuff. But at that moment, what did it reveal about you, about Ken? I'm not talking about Lieutenant Ken. I'm talking about the Ken that stood and said, you know what, Dad, I want to be an Air Force pilot. Like, what did that bring? And I just so you can share with the audience, because I know it's somebody that's listening, that's watching, that's probably going through something similar in their journey when everything is stacked against them. What's the scoop on that, Ken? What did it reveal about you, the individual?
um, it revealed to me that I was capable of taking one step forward, no matter how bad it got, uh,
Mm,
um, and that honestly that I didn't need to rely on other people to give me my identity. My identity is something that I feel like God gives us our identity, but
mm.
certainly no board, no other pilots are allowed to give me my identity. So they gave me an identity of failure, and I refuse to accept that. So that's what happened to me.
Wow. And here's the positive spin on it, right? Not a lot of people could do a crash and walk away and talk about it. Like, what this, right? Because somebody always told me, Kings, find the positive part,
Right.
right? Like at the time, for you, you felt everything was just crashing in.
Yeah.
Holy crap, you survived a plane, and you had a student. Like, what did surviving cost you?
Um, you mean surviving the aircraft accident?
Surviving the aircraft accident, surviving the investigation, surviving the doubt, surviving the anxiety, surviving the depression, surviving the PTSD at that moment. What did surviving cost you? What's the scoop on that?
Well, it cost me some friendships. It also cost me. It also cost me. It also cost me my own self-identity. I wondered what kind of man I really am. Can I succeed in life? And it cost me high blood pressure, it cost me stress, cost me um, difficulties in. I still have bad dreams to this day. So it was a very subtle thing, but I always, the kind of environment that I was in, and you know this because you were military police, but when you're in an environment where guys are pretty tough, there's no quarter given for failure. You have a gun. There's no quarter given. You're given the responsibility of a jet. So, um, when you're in that kind of environment, almost like one level below or lower than a Top Gun environment, it's really, really hard to be perceived as anything but perfect. So, what happened to me over the years was that I just took one step at a time, kind of using kind of what David Goggins talked about, those calluses, the knowing that I had made it through this, one way or another, I can make it through that. And I just kind of pushed forward. I went to the next pilot training, the next flight training that I went to, and I end up struggling. You talk about what it hurt me or what it cost me. It was very difficult because I knew that I couldn't make an error. I had no room, zero, for making any kind of error. So I worked my tail off to become an outstanding graduate of tanker training, a distinguished graduate of my intelligence officer training, whatever it was. Even when I got out of the Air Force, I worked really hard to become the best stockbroker that I could. I did everything possible that I could to never be perceived as a failure, but I had to carry that stress in me too. It's a constant stress. And I still to this day, I have bad dreams about failure. And you wish PTSD, everybody has different types of symptoms. You wish it was something you could package up and just ship out of your brain, ship out of your mind and be done with it and just move on, suck it up and just move on. But I learned through faith. I learned through love with my wife. I learned through just different things like that you can't just ship it out. You just have to deal with it and be as positive as possible. So that's kind of what happened to me. And I went off to tanker training, became a tanker pilot, co-pilot, tanker aircraft commander, refueling the SR-71 all over the world. And then I end up becoming an intelligence officer like my father, going to an
Wow.
intelligence officer school. So, and then I went back to flying, and then I got out of the Air Force and joined the reserve.
So for the ones that are just pulling up, sitting down on the stoop, getting the scoop of the author on Broken Wings, if y'all just tuning in, you just heard somebody that had his lifelong childhood dream. He got it. He got into the Air Force. He went to the academy. He wanted to be a fighter pilot. He got the next best thing as being a training pilot to train others
Yeah.
outside other countries. And he did it. He did not say no. And then tragedy struck. His plane went down. He went through all the requirements. But look, he's here sharing the story because he got to that rock bottom, his rock bottom place. Cause we asked him, like, what did it cost you? He said it cost him friendship, it cost him this, it cost him everything. But did y'all hear or did y'all listen? I challenge y'all to go back and listen to it again. He went on to be an intel officer. He went on to refuel the SR-71. For the ones who don't know, with the SR-71, that's the fastest aircraft in the world. It looks like a long a long nose, and it goes supersonic fast. And he was the pilot refueling that aircraft. After the crash, after when everything went up in smokes and he was doubting himself, and you know what he did? He picked himself up. He said he loves Goggins, everybody. So if you just pulling up and you hear us talk about David Goggins, he talks about that callus, getting them callus on your hand that you have to go over and over and over again to get stronger. That's what you pulled up. That's what you're sitting on the stoop. That's what you're getting the scoop on is Ken being the author of Unbroken Wings. And the next part, Ken, I want to say, imagine if someone is listening today feels like their own life has crashed. Maybe it wasn't an airplane.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a marriage.
Yeah.
It could have been a career. Maybe a medical diagnosis or deployment, financial collapse, a personal loss. What would you want them to know before they give up believing they can fly again?
Well, I talk about how I feel like broken doesn't mean that you're finished. Just take one
Mm,
step forward and don't believe that don't take the identity that someone else gives you. You can make your own identity. Transition. You want to get out of you want to get out of the military? Go on and do something. Do your love. I went on to be a stockbroker. I ended up owning a photography studio. Now I write books. I'm an editor for a magazine. You can do People think that they can only do one thing in life. And then if you
mm.
have a struggle in that life, people identify you as having had a struggle in that life. Hey, that life didn't work out. Get another life, move
Wow,
on, take another
that's
step.
good.
I mean, that's what I think. So, uh, yeah,
That- That's good, Ken. Because where you said that, where I kept thinking, what word kept coming to my mind? Restoration,
restoration,
rebuilding.
redemption, restoration. Yes. Yes.
What's the scoop on that word right there, restoration, that you could share with the audience and the listeners? That word right, because that's all I kept hearing when you were sharing. What do people do? Restore. Don't stay where you're at. You're not that. You're not
Right.
just a pilot. You're broke. You went down the list. Because sometimes people die with their identity or what they once was.
Well,
Hey,
particularly military
right.
guys, right? They get out and they've done one thing in the military and they think that's all they
Mm,
can do. They can do a million things. So, restoration doesn't mean doing the same thing. It just means finding faith in yourself that you can do anything, and finding faith in something else, either the loved ones. For me, it was
mm,
God, but to find faith in yourself, I think. So my book is about faith, but it's about faith in God and it's about faith in self. It's not one or the other. It's both. And you find faith in yourself by realizing that God is the only identity, that you as a child of God are the only identity that's really important in life. All this other stuff is just noise. Whether you're a pilot, stockbroker, you're a podcaster,
mm.
whatever, those things are noise. You're a human being. You give it your best. You have faith in yourself. You have faith in a higher power. You're gonna end up with an amazing life.
Wow. And it's like, is it? It's not a single moment, right?
No.
Let's open. They say peel back the onion. It's a
Yeah.
series of choices.
Yes.
You could have chose to walk away.
Yes.
You could have chose to let that eat you up inside and just say there, like I downed the aircraft, a multi-million-dollar aircraft at 24 years old. I was in charge of.
Hey, hey, listen. Let me tell you, Kings. I held on to anger,
Mm,
bitterness, fear. I held on to that for several years, even though I went on to fly other airplanes. I held on it for several years, but I remember I remember an evening at my townhouse in California where my now wife, and I were at the townhouse with a young lady that was dying of cystic fibrosis. And she had such a positive outlook on life. And I kept thinking to myself that night when I was wallowing in my sorrow, telling her the story, who am I to be sitting here wallowing in my pain,
mm.
complaining, being bitter? And here's a young lady that is dying and probably won't live for a year or two, and she's living life to the fullest. And do you know, that evening, this is the absolute truth. That evening I pulled out my flight evaluation board documents, probably 6 inches thick. And I grabbed those documents and I said, this is it. I'm going to change my attitude. And I walked out back and I opened up the dumpster and I threw it into the dumpster, into my past. And from that moment on, I decided that I was going to be as positive as I could. went into my flying squadron, volunteered for this, volunteered for that, tried to be the best pilot I could, took different assignments in the Air Force. And one way or the other, at the end of the whole thing, my dad retired with 34 years in as an intelligence
Wow.
officer and as a colonel. And at the end of the story, I end up retiring as 34 years in uniform, counting the four at the academy, as an intelligence officer and as a colonel. So the young kid
Man.
that was 10 years old that looked over that wall that wanted to be like his dad actually ended up being like his dad. So
Wow.
I don't
Yeah.
know how it happened. You know, it's God's
Right.
will or whatever, but I just took one step forward at a time and tried to be this positive guy as I could be from then on.
Wow. And I appreciate that because I can't wait till I get the physical copy,
Oh, you're
right?
getting it.
Right. I have the electronic copy, everybody. Can't say you gotta send me the physical copy. So if you could just hold up the physical copy, because what I love to ask authors is what made you come up with that on the front cover? Because I tell people I love to walk through the airport and I go straight to the book section and see the first thing that grabbed my attention is the cover.
Well, my wings were broken. I mean, when I went to the
Mm,
flight evaluation board, they were going to take my wings. So to me, I stood on top of those broken wings and rebuilt them again, and I rebuilt them through faith. That's why it says the flight that tested my faith and the journey that restored it. So, yep,
wow.
that was it. And
Wow.
now I'm the editor for a Veterans Life magazine, and we tell stories like you do podcasts as guys who have persevered. So, yeah, I try to give back that way now too.
And thank you for that. And throughout this conversation, we talked about broken wings. We talked about restored faith.
Yep.
We talked about second chances. But what I want to ask you is something
Here it comes.
bigger.
Oh
Here
boy.
it comes, right? You already know. What part of your story almost never got written because you nearly stopped believing there would be another chapter?
What part of my story almost didn't get written or actually didn't
Yes,
happen in life?
that almost never got written.
Well, that when I end up going to that board with
Mm,
the where they were going to take my wings, honestly thought my whole life was I had lost a girlfriend, I had lost my career, I almost lost my life, and I thought, what am I going to do now? I'm just a defeated guy who's not going to go and do anything in life. And that was a moment that my story could have stopped right there. But like I said, you hang around enough inspiring people. My father, the heroes
mm,
from my books. You read guys like David Goggins. You listen to the podcasts of people on your type of show. The more that you bring that kind of thing into you, you realize the resilience and the perseverance that humans are capable of. And
mm.
I wanted to be one of those guys, and now I want to, with the book and my work at a food bank and my work in the magazine, I want to, like your fellow the other day, Chris Kruger.
Yes,
I remember his
Chris.
talk. He wrote a book, an amazing book. I want to be a guy that when somebody reads my book, they can see a part of their life in my book and find some sort of hope, some sort of faith in themselves and in a higher power to get through it.
Nah, and like I told you, Kara, earlier before we hit record, like this is my part of my healing journey, right? Paying it
Yes.
forward, giving it
Yes.
back. This is part of me healing, and your willingness to put your experience inside of a book, to hit submit, to send it out to the world,
Well,
to
the Kings, it was hard because I wondered what my friends would say.
mm,
I wondered what those Top Gun type of pilots would say. And do you know, and I feared that, but I felt like God had put it on my heart to write the story. And the only way you can impact somebody is being vulnerable and be truthful and talk about your
wow,
struggle. If you don't do that, you're not going to impact anyone. So
wow.
that's yeah.
You want to know a secret, Ken? Look,
What?
and
What?
this way everybody sitting on the stool. They keep hearing this. You ever hear this saying like, if you hear the same thing from different people at different times, something got to be of truth.
Yeah.
So I heard you say it. I hear others say like, "Hey, when are you gonna do your book and I'm still, like, man, I don't
Yeah.
know. My story is not that. Is by having this podcast and shout out to Sean Welsh and the whole Vet S.O.S podcast network for let me have a piece of the pie here on the scoop is to S.O.S, right? Vet S.O.S,
Yeah.
share our
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
Vets share our stories. To have me be part of this chain, right? Because all you're now a new link to the chain, right? Because we're building this chain to keep
Yeah.
pulling people out of the deep edge, out of the deep water.
Well,
So,
remember this though. The story isn't necessarily what you did, whether I was a pilot or an intelligence officer, or whether you were an MP,
mm,
or if you're a Navy SEAL or a helicopter pilot. Those are all good background pieces. The real story is the human condition, the
yes.
struggle, the vulnerability, the emotion, the reality of what's going on beneath the surface. That's where the story needs to be told.
Mm. And this story definitely gives somebody that's right there with their broken wings the courage to keep writing theirs.
Yeah.
And before we sign off, this is what I love to do with everybody. Like I said, I go I go through the book and
Thanks for
I
the
like
warning. Thanks for the warning.
the red light comes on. I'm like, man, 'cause when I'm reading something, it just comes to my head and I write it down real quick and I resonate with it. So you ready?
Yeah.
Faith isn't tested when life is smooth. It's revealed when everything shakes. And I share this with the audience because what I'm about to read off, this is what I experienced in life so far in this short time on this earth and reading Ken's book. So when I read authors' books, I put myself in their book
You
because
do.
I could see me in their book. So I
Mm.
challenge everybody that's here sitting on the stoop, getting the scoop. I challenge you to go get the book. We gotta get the information on how you get the book and stuff, but the guests that are come on here, this is how I have to incorporate it in my brain, right? For what I've been through in my life journey.
Yeah.
So if I could do this, trust me, you can do it too. You ready for the rest, Ken?
I'm
Check it
ready.
out.
I'm ready.
Brokenness is not the end of the story. It's often the beginning of restoration.
Yes.
Sometimes survival is the only being the first miracle. It was a
Yep.
miracle. You survived like a plane. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a miracle. I went through what I went through, and I'm still here.
Yep. First miracle.
You may lose your wings, but you don't have to lose your purpose. And this is
Ooh.
what we just talked about. Ken said it earlier. If y'all just now tuning in,
You should have written my cover.
that's what I'm saying. This book is life. You could pick it up 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and it's gonna still be and with that times. Here's another one, Ken. Healing begins when honesty replaces pretending. God often rebuilds us from places we thought we were beyond repair. The storm may change your plans, but it doesn't have to change your calling.
Wow.
Resilience is built on one faithful step at a time. I shared with you my health journey, right?
Yeah.
Over 5 billion I'm right now.
Yeah.
One foot in front of the other. It took me a while, but I told myself, look, Kings, don't let a day pass by. People ask me how many times a week you walk. I said every day that ends in a Y. That's part of that Goggins mentality, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm going out there. If I could breathe, I'm walking.
Right.
Your greatest setback may become someone else's greatest source of hope. You know how many people is gonna get this book and read it and like, man, he did all of that, and now he's a retired veteran author, paying it forward, still doing some more stuff. If he could do it, I could do it too. Like you know what I'm saying? It gives people
That's
that hope.
right.
Here's one for you. Resilience is built on one faithful step at a time, and your greatest setback may become someone else's greatest source of hope, because restoration isn't returning you to who you are, it's becoming who you were meant to be.
Oh, yeah, it's well put.
So, Ken, how can they get a copy of your book, Broken Wings? How can they reach out to you? How can they start putting that 100-mile-an-hour tape, that duct tape, right? Because duct tape solves everything, right? You put that duct tape on the wings, like, man, that
Right.
thing will,
Yeah.
will lock that 100-mile-an-hour tape. That's what we call it in Defender country, right? Put that 100-mile-an-hour tape on there.
Right.
For
Exactly.
our non-military listeners, our non-veterans, 100-mile-an-hour tape, that's that duct tape, man. That thing could stand with that thing holds together vehicles. I just let you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that.
I know.
So how can
Probably.
they get a copy? How can they reach out? How can they connect?
Okay. So to get the book, it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, and it's on paperback. And I'm about ready to do an audiobook. So that's in the process of getting work. So that's just on Amazon, Broken Wings. Secondly, I have a website called kenmellott.com, KenMellott.com. They can read more about me, more about my other writing, more about the book. And they can get a free prologue if they want to read the prologue and see the initial part of that bad day. That's how.
Man, I appreciate it. Y'all heard it here first. Y'all came, y'all sat on the stoop, y'all got the scoop. Thank you for coming on the Vet SOS Podcast Network, Ken, and sharing your insights.
I loved it. And those things you said at the end, boy, they related to my book, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
I know that's pretty amazing.
Yes, they did. And I do that just to let the authors know and let the readers and soon to be author, right? Because there's gonna be some authors are like, man, you know what? I'm gonna write my book.
That's you. Yes.
I'm gonna get there.
Okay.
I just share with people like that is what you want to have in your for being a great author is to where it resonate. Even if it's one, I keep hearing this time and time again from authors. If it reach one person,
Yes.
it reach the person.
That's the reason I wrote my book. It doesn't matter how many I sell, and I've sold a bunch, but I don't care about the sales. I care about reaching somebody.
Well, you got one right here.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming and sitting on the stoop. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that Vet SOS Lifeline. We're here to help. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and send it to somebody that you care for. Until next time, everybody, take care. Peace.
Thanks, Kings.